All right. Was telling me friggin' trying to find more resources. I wouldn't fire it up. But we're back. We're here. We're in the swamp. Today, we're going to talk. Got a little presentation. I saw last time I was trying to do some lab work, and then I saw that the camera was coming in pretty blurry. So maybe I'll save some of the lab work until I can work on the connection a little bit, but I'm not paying for the $40 a month for StreamYard. So I'll save the lab work for some pre-recorded videos. You can check out some different resources for lab, like my Patreon and things, Instagram and YouTube as well. I'll be just kind of focusing on some lab work here. Sorry, but then because this comes in pretty blurry, maybe we'll focus more on a little bit of talking, some updates, a little chit chat back and forth, whatever it kind of turns into. We'll see. But yeah, so lately, what I've been doing is staring at these plates. You won't be able to see it too well, but got some more monos coming in. So these are some HEVA. Let's see if I can find one that's actually got some monos going. But this is the Lion's Mane from Virginia that I got from Lion's Mane James. Performance Fungi James, and some of these are germinating, I swear, but just barely starting. I posted yeah, you guys aren't gonna be able to see that, but if you look, let me get my finger on it. There's a little spot right near my pinky touching. And that's where there's just starting to be a few little fibers on some of these plates. So I've got whole stacks of these grab and drag plates from some Lion's Manes. So that way I can start to isolate some of those single spores and then work to breed some heat tolerant, Florida tolerant, just easy growing based on my current outdoor setup. It's pretty hot and bare bones. So if I can work on breeding some things that are going to like that a little bit more, it'll make me feel like I'm back in my fruiting chambers up in Maine again. So we're going to start breeding some more tolerant species. So I got some of those plates. So then I'll officially have two different species, or both Lion's Mane, but two different cultivars to then isolated monos, single spores, to then be able to conjoin those together in a planned fashion, making up sort of a breeding project. So yeah, that's pretty fun. And I've just been getting a bunch of different things going on in terms of substrate today, which we'll be talking about. This bag of substrate is, as you can see, starting to fruit, right? And so I should have put this one in the other day, but I've got a couple of these, just a bunch of different blue oyster phenotypes. Not for sure phenos, different looking, behaving, but a bunch of different isolates, just a bunch of the real strong producers on agar, just the nice lookers, early germinators, things like that on some of the early agar plates. Isolated those to like a T2. And then as long as those were all nice growing and worked with me, I dumped a couple, but just working to find just a more tolerant blue oyster variety for my areas. It's the POCNS, the cap and stem blue oyster. So that one's a beauty. But yeah, just doing some Florida fruiting. It's been pretty hot, but it's starting to, I think down here, I'm a newbie in Florida still, but I think come September, it seems like some people start to get into and reset for some fall gardening and things like that. There's kind of like a summer hibernation, kind of like there's like a winter hibernation in Maine. Now there's like a summer hibernation in Florida in terms of things slowing down a little bit. People just sticking to what they can do, not as much garden things. Gets hot and people get hot and bothered. It's a thing. Look it up, the hot and bothered effect. There's probably YouTube videos about it. But yeah, so it's been pretty hot, but it's starting to cool down. I think a bunch of people are starting to think and get ready for some fall gardens and stuff down here. So I'm going to be trying and hopefully getting into some more local areas to do some local classes, local inoculations, and just work with the community a little bit more. Get some wine caps going, get some oysters going, get some cultivation classes going. So I guess that's also part of why I'm continuing to do these lives is just so I can continue to get more comfortable talking. A lot of these ideas and things I've known, I've just kind of more been online, talking with people through a computer. We're kind of keeping it to myself. My brother hears a lot of it, kind of understands it. He's been getting it for a few years now, so he's my local mushroom guy to spiel to. So that works out well for me. He almost kind of understands things, and honestly, probably knows more than a lot of other mushroom people just from being around me spieling. But that's why I'm trying to do more of these talks, more of these videos, just so I can work on a little bit more coherently, developing my thoughts, developing my ideas. But mushrooms and fungus and growing things, and getting other people growing things just kind of gets me excited. So then I just kind of spew. But we've got a little slideshow here. It's let me just connect it. Just a little slideshow about substrates, mushroom substrates. This is not like the one and only resource for mushroom substrates. I'll give you my recipe there at the end as well, and then we can talk about some things. And if any questions come up for anyone tuning in, feel free to ask questions. And if anything comes up, I can answer those at the end or whenever. But any questions at all at any time, reach out to me, leave a comment on anything I post, reach out to me directly, swampfoxfungi@gmail.com or at swampfoxfungi on any of the socials, Instagram, Facebook, and such. Here on YouTube, and I'm also working to build a Discord and Patreon community to help kind of work, build a better community and fund some of our work between those two. We'll also give you guys a lot of good information and inside looks through the Patreon. So before I get into it, support me, like this video, subscribe, I don't know, do the things, help a guy out. Just trying to get more fungal everywhere. So we'll get into it. So let's see. I gotta do anything? That's just nice. Yeah, I'll take it. Can I move myself around? Let me see. Just messing with StreamYard. I don't know. Why is there two? Oh gosh. Just one. Nice. Now I can just put myself way low. I like that. All right. No, and it didn't save it. What? There it is. Nice. All right. So what makes a substrate? So when it comes to mushrooms, when it comes to growing mushrooms, you'll hear the word substrate a lot. And what that's usually referring to is the final fruiting media, the final media that the mushroom or the fungus is going to be growing into. Technically, I guess a substrate, maybe not technically, I didn't look up technically the word substrate for this. But I mean, like a media, like an agar can be your substrate if that's what you want it to be. You can make it. You can put wood in there too. It's a loose term, but really, whenever we're talking about substrate, we're going to be talking about. Maybe it's not a loose term. Don't come at me, gardeners. I'm not exact on my vocab and things, but for us, substrate is going to be the final fruiting vessel. So that's going to be this bad layer right here. This is mostly wood, with some supplementation, not always necessary, but mostly wood, hydrated, which is key, and then inoculated with some grain spawn. It's sterilized beforehand, but what the substrate does, especially in these senses that we're going to be focusing on, and there's a different presentation thing, and my first live, I'm now wondering if I didn't use the presentation thing correctly. I think I did though. This is just different. Anywho, I'm not a tech guy. This back end stuff, I don't know. But so we're going to be focusing on the wood rot or wood lovers and white rot fungus. If you're growing different species, whether that's cordyceps, button mushrooms, wine caps, or or even different different active species. Those are all going to be on different substrates. But for this video, for this presentation, for this talk, I'll talk more and focus more on wood lovers. Questions could be wherever, but a lot of the same ideas apply to each. Not always the recipes, but things can be trained. So yeah, we're focusing more on the wood lovers. Each is going to produce, each of these different types of mushroom, types of fungus is going to be producing its own suite of chemicals and enzymes that's capable of breaking down different things. Some are going to be more flexible than others. Things like lion's mane, kind of like their substrates, how they like their substrates. They like the hardwood fuel pellets with some supplementation, but they don't like straw. They don't like cardboard. They don't like weird stuff. Oysters, you can almost feed them anything. You could probably feed them meat and they'll probably figure it out. But like, yeah, oysters will grow on coffee, cardboard. They'll grow on some compost. They'll grow on wood, straw, anything. So depending on what, and some actives and stuff can be trained to eat and produce on wood as well. There's some work on that. And so that's just slowly feeding the cultures a little bit more and more of those substrates that you're looking for them to finish on. But for this topic, for this, we'll be focused on the wood lovers. And so each is going to produce its own suite of chemicals that's able to break it down. White rot fungi, what we mostly grow. These are going to be wood lovers. And yeah, they're quite flexible. So substrates, what makes a substrate? So a substrate is mostly carbon, some nitrogen, a lot of water, and physical structure. So pictures here, there's a 5-pound substrate bags with a little bit of wheat bran mixed in, but that's kind of the common mushroom grow bag. It's unicorn grow bags. Usually I use a 14A for 5-pound bags. If you want to use 10-pound bags, 10-pound substrates, you're going to be going more for an XLSA bag. Those have more headspace, bigger filters, and just more space for all the substrate. But for growing mushrooms, a lot of times it's going to look like those bags until it's colonized. And then it looks like this. And then I'll just slip this back and cut a triangle right here. And then there'll be oysters in a couple days. But the substrate is going to be mostly carbon. That nitrogen is a big limiting factor. If you don't have enough of it, you're going to be getting smaller, kind of reduced yields, a little slower growth, but also too much nitrogen, and things are going to get weird and funky. You're going to draw in more contaminants. Things are going to get mutated. So you got to find that right balance. But a major thing about what the substrate is going to do for the mushroom is going to be hold water. So mushrooms are, depending on the species, I think Ganodermas are more like 65%, but a lot of mushrooms are up to like 90% water. They're a lot of water. And so what this substrate bag is a bunch of hydrated wood. If you're growing different species, like different actives, that's going to be a bunch of hydrated cocoa coir or peat moss, but usually cocoa coir. And so really what the substrate is a vessel that can hold all of that water that the mycelium can then round up and then put into producing fungus or producing mushrooms. Sorry. So for us wood lovers, the carbon, a lot of the carbon is there in place with the wood, the hardwood fuel pellets. Depending on your different grows and what you're doing, the nitrogen is going to be like wheat bran or soy hull pellets, things like that. And then depending on your wood, depending on if you use cocoa or maybe you add some vermiculite or some different additives and things, you're going to have a certain amount of water that your substrate can hold. And then it's also just that physical structure. So sometimes some mushrooms need something to kind of grab onto, something to fruit off of. Some things like shiitakes kind of need that faux log, that something dense that they can wrap a casing around the outside. And kind of just sit there and incubate and do their thing, and then be able to fruit off of those and pull all of the resources off of them. So it's also going to be able to provide some physical structure. So it's not just food. It's kind of a mix of a bunch of different factors. And depending on which species, whether it's oysters, lion's manes, cordyceps, actives, turkey tail, Ganoderma, Enoki, brown boletes or black boletes, whatever it is, you're going to have a different final substrate. Maybe not different always, but you can tailor it to different ways because they're all produce their own enzymes and have their own preferences. So why they're able to do this are part of the fungi's amazing abilities to break down other things. Comes from the white rat fungi is their ability to break down lignin. So many moons ago, dinosaur times, they're I'm not gonna I don't know the eras and things. I should, but they're fascinating, but I don't remember them. So early times, dinosaur times, whatever, pre-dinosaur times. All these trees are starting to develop and break down. Lignin was created and by nature, then the things can break it down, but not really, and very, very slowly. So trees were building up, and then kind of settled down in the ground and got squished down. And a bunch of that turned into like our oil reserves today. But in that process, white rot fungi were also kind of developed the ability to break down lignin. And so how they do that is by reducing, or they have like a little free radical or a little oxygen or something that I forget what exactly. I think free radical is, I think, the word I saw, but they like then pierce through the lignin. And then in doing that, kind of slowly break the lignin apart and oxidate it. So it's like rusting, but different, but the same type of process, and just like slowly picks it apart and breaks it up from the inside into simpler compounds. So then other things can get in there, kind of cohabit, co-break it down, other fungi, other bacterias and things. And so that's how the white rat fungi are kind of that initial break in and separate for the lignin and the cellulose and things. And depending on which mushroom and fungus and which enzymes they produce, they do some of them better than others. So yeah, we had a bunch of wood and everything building up. That's how we got all our oil today, basically. But then fungi, shout out, came in and decided that they were going to start breaking it all down, and then that's able to then recycle everything into all the nutrients back into the forest. But what's also cool about breaking down the lignin is that when they break down the lignin, that's part of how that they're able to break down a bunch of different chemicals and industrial pollutants and like oils and all these bad things that we hear about fungi being able to break down. Is a lot of them, I guess, I'm not a chemist, so I'm not going to use all these crazy terms and act like I fully understand everything. But essentially, the fungi are able to break down lignin, this super complex structure, and it just so happens that a lot of these industrial pollutants, petrochemicals, oils, pesticides, and such, have structures that really closely resemble lignin. And so in that, the fungi are just able to use those same enzymes that they use to break down the lignin, but instead they're able to break down a bunch of different petroleum, oils, pesticides, pollutants, and things into some simpler, less harmful compounds that then are able to better work through the system rather than as the pollutant itself causing damage. It can kind of reduce that into some simpler, softer compounds, basically. Depending on what it is, you might not want to eat the mushrooms. A lot of things will be concentrated in the mushroom, but nonetheless, it's going to be kind of breaking a lot of those things down, which is where it really gets the interest. It's not as much that we want to eat a bunch of mushrooms off the oil as much as we want something that can simplify that oil and spillage and pollutants into things that our systems, our plants, our soils, we can actually utilize. So, woods. Most of what we're using, that's most of what's going to be holding the water, really does provide all the nutrients that all the fungi need, or most of the fungi, the ones that we're growing, need. Some of them just prefer some different supplementations, especially indoor, especially to get any bits of yields that make it worth it. So really, your substrate can just be wood. If you're just starting out, you don't want to go too crazy. You're just learning about fungus. You're just learning about different mushrooms. Wood's a great base substrate. It's not It's not too nutritious. So you're able to, it's kiln dried and everything pressed into those pellets. So it's pretty clean to begin with. A lot of times you can just use like a hot water to pasteurize it. Um, it's not, and especially then you spawn a little bit heavy. Don't use a wheat culture. But wood is pretty hard for other things to break down. And it's a pretty clean process if you get barbecue pellets or hardwood fuel pellets, especially barbecue pellets, because those are meant to be around and for human, not human consumption, but around human, used for grills. So people like to keep those pretty clean for what it is. So hardwood fuel pellets, barbecue pellets, that can be a great starter substrate. Just hydrate those. Field capacity, which is where you're going to grab a handful, squeeze it a little bit, get a few drops going. You can play with that a little bit, but look for hardwoods. Hardwoods are going to be a lot better than your softwoods, and some softwoods are usable. Some species do better on softwoods than others. Some are more capable of breaking down pines, like some oysters and things. But you're going to want to look for more hardwoods. The harder the wood, basically, the better. Some different hardwoods, like I wrote it down, I think. But there's some hardwoods that are like a little bit softer, easier to break down. My handwriting is so bad. I wrote it down somewhere. I guess I had it there. I just didn't see it because of this little banner. So yeah, the deciduous, when you're looking for trees for hardwood, deciduous is going to be better than coniferous. A lot of coniferous trees like pine and such are going to be producing these antifungal compounds, while things in hardwoods like some alder, cottonwood, poplar, all break down pretty easily. But also you like these dense woods like oak, maple, ironwood. Oak and maple are really oak, especially, I think, is probably the most used. But depending on where you are, depending on what's around you, you can look around in the forest and kind of make use of what you have. So that's one of the cool things and great things about growing mushrooms, is that they're able to utilize the waste and the products in your area. So there's no one exact answer. To some people, it's kind of frustrating, but it's also what makes it fun, is that there's plenty of options of numerous different things that you can do, that you can grow mushrooms off of. And even just wood, you can use plenty of different wood products. And we'll get into some of the other options and alternatives. But even just woods, you can use most woods. You don't want to use too many things that produce like those antifungal compounds, and different smells and things. Probably the more it smells, the more it's going to be producing some compounds, like cedar and such. I get on the camera on my brain. I need to start taking lion's mane before I do this. My performance fungi at lion's mane. Shout out performance fungi. If you need lion's mane, any tinctures for performance fungi, best ones in the game. Let's see what's next. Come on, there it is. So yeah, so also depending on what you're growing, your major carbon source, your major water source, your next kind of step, your physical structure, rather than wood. If maybe you don't have access to wood in your area, can be straws. So these are often cereal straws. Wheat is probably the most common, but rye, oat, rice, whatever. Oysters love straw. Like people will start whole mushroom farms just running mushrooms, or just running oyster mushrooms on straw. A lot of times using buckets like you see on the right, but you can also use laundry hampers, strainers, anything, bags. You can use like I've seen people use and get those like litter genies or diaper genies. So they're just like the little square, long tube, and so you can just pull some out, knot it, fill a bunch of oyster mushroom spawn, a bunch of mushroom straw. Sorry, a bunch of the straw after you pasteurize it into these tubes. Put some spawn in there, put a couple like nice long tube, and then be able to hang it. And And so you can use like the litter genie or diaper genie bags to get those nice tubes if you're struggling to find some of those nice vessels. And if not buckets, which are reusable, those are another great option. And then you can pasteurize it. So you can do this the traditional way. So you can use hot water soak it for pasteurization. You're going to be looking at like 160 degrees for steam pasteurization. But for this, you can also just use regular pasteurization in terms of boiling it. So drop it into a barrel, kind of keep it submerged. It's going to want to float. So if you keep it down with like a brick and like a little cover strainer, pasteurize that by boiling it for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then you can let it drain out for the night, for the day, and then inoculate that. And you're probably good for about like 10 days before a bunch of other contaminants are going to move in. So you want to use it pretty quick, get some spawn in there. By the time that it comes around that anything else is trying to grow on it, oyster should grow pretty quick on the straw and cover it pretty well. And then you can also cold pasteurize. So if you want to do some cold pasteurization, that is using hydrated lime. And so it's extremely alkaline. Fungi like to grow at a pretty neutral pH, as most things do, but more contaminants like more acidic. And the more that fungi are in there, they kind of work it and make it a little bit more acidic. Same with the contaminants. You use the cold pasteurization. You're using, it's about 2 to 4 pounds. So there's probably more information. I didn't go super deep, but like 2 to 4 pounds depending per 50 gallons of water. Using the hydrated lime, which is calcium hydroxide. And then you're going to take the oysters, just like boiling it. You're going to weigh it down, drop it in the barrel with that hydrated lime, and that's going to shoot the pH up to, I think, probably closer to like 9 or 10, depending on how much you use and starting materials in the water and such. And what that does by shooting the pH up with the lime is then not as much stuff is going to want to grow on it. You have, again, probably 10 days, 2 weeks of a head start where it's going to be sitting at a higher pH, sitting closer to like the 9 range, and then nothing else is going to really want to grow on it. But fungi, mushrooms, even though they like neutral pH, they're still going to grow and they're still going to colonize that straw sitting at a pH of 9. And then as the mushrooms continue to grow on it, they'll drop the pH back down to a range that they like better. So cold pasteurization with the lime works great. It's cheap, low tech, do it in the backyards, but it's not quite as consistent at like a large scale. It is, and it can be, but it's not what you see the massive mushroom farm down the road doing usually. So, also, one of the best things about mushrooms, you can grow them on a bunch of different agricultural waste, which is kind of some pellets, and some straw is kind of already agricultural waste. But really, these are things like seed hulls, coffee waste, banana waste, paper products, banana fronds. I guess I already said that. That was with that one. Soybean roughage, sugarcane waste, paper product, corn cobs, cardboard that have cardboard in there. You can grow them on books, jeans. You can grow mushroom on jeans. It's not agricultural waste, but you can grow mushrooms on basically anything. So what all of these are going to be, some of them are just a higher carbon based dry structure, like the corn cobs. There's not really much to it. But you're able to just kind of pasteurize those and add a little bit of grain spawn, and then using simpler things like maybe just the dried banana fronds or just paper products like cardboard or corn cobs and things with that like less nutrition. You use a little bit more grain spawn if you want a really high yield, but even so, they can grow with lower yields. Like you see on this image, I just pulled it. It was came up online with from somebody's some TikTok, but about video, and they're out there, and a lot of people do actually grow oyster mushrooms off of these corn cobs, and so they'll soak them overnight, likely with a lime pasteurization, and then the next day they let them dry for a little bit, and then layer in some little clumps of grain spawn, or similar spawn. You can use technically just the mushroom butts, but it's just not as clean, and not as for sure. But they are then using the corn cobs to produce a decent amount of mushrooms. It's not as big as some of the flushes you'll see maybe using like a master's mix, but they're still able to grow on all of these different things and produce food, and then go to compost, and be a more productive compost, rather than a lot of these just being kind of composted from the jump and being good, but nothing special. Which compost is special, but then once you can extract some medicine, some food, some mushrooms from it, then the spent mushroom substrate is still even more valuable than it was before, just as waste products. So also sugarcane waste, that's something. I'm down here in Florida, and so I've got bananas going, and so I do want to take and dry a bunch of banana leaves and some of those stems and such, and dry some of that back. Not as much when I chop it, because it's so much water that when I the trunk itself is going to be pretty moist and have a lot of water in there and be hard to dry back. But some of the leaves and stalks and things, or stems, it's like layers. It's like bananas are like a grass. I think technically they're some sort of grass, not a tree. They're crazy, but they grow really fast, and so I'm gonna have a bunch of banana leaves. So I do want to do, I think, dry some of the banana leaves. And being down in Florida, I can grow sugarcane, or I'll hit up red flower fungi, and he's probably got somebody down in Miami I can get some sugarcane from. So I'd like to do a little banana and sugarcane, but I'd like to grow it myself. It takes up space, and that's a major limiting factor right now. But you can do a bunch of combinations of these different wastes, and utilize a bunch of different kind of resources to hit that ideal substrate by using some banana fronds and some corn cobs to hold water and provide structure and carbon. And then you throw in some sugar cane and that sugar content, or a bunch of the coffee waste and that high nitrogen and such, and that's going to help kickstart and fruit. So you can kind of layer them to create a better substrate rather than just the one by itself. And so just died real quick. As soon as I start talking, I don't steady go on rants like this until I get in front of the camera. My throat is never ready for it. But I'm happy I get to talk a little bit about mushrooms, and some people get to hear it and listen, and maybe we'll talk more about mushrooms, and it's great. So, I thought I was getting another one. All right. So they can grow on wood, they can grow on books, paper products, they can grow on straw, they can grow on banana fronds, corn cobs. What else? So some are going to prefer dung, or compost, whether they're button mushrooms, active species. Some are going to prefer insects, like I was saying, if it's like cordyceps, because they kind of just lack those different enzymes and chemicals. And depending on the species, depending on the cultivar, you can get some different crossover and interweaving of those. But there's also going to be some plastic-eating fungi. There's going to be, like I was saying, I didn't get a picture of that because they just don't look that cool. And it's cooler to see oyster mushrooms growing on a pair of jeans. So you can pasteurize and grow oyster mushrooms off of jeans. There's a bunch of people that have done it. There's a couple viral videos I've seen of it. That picture, I believe, in the middle, I think I'm not positive it's the exact picture, but based on what the caption was, that's an old Roger Rabbit Holy Bible grow. So you can pasteurize books. And so the common is to grow some cubes off of the Holy Bible. It's great use, honestly. But you can do any type of book. You can do it off a Harry Potter book. And then also there's some fungi and things that are going to be eating other fungi. So That's like a lobster mushroom. And so it really depends on some cordyceps, like eat off of truffles. So those are interesting. So really, depending on which species of fungus, which species of mushroom you want to work with, it's like it's almost endless, right? You just have to use your imagination, and you can basically grow mushrooms off of almost anything. Some of them are going to be needing some training, and some of them, like oils, maybe you don't want to eat those mushrooms. Although I know Stamets talks about doing that experiment, growing mushrooms off of oils, and he tested the mushrooms, and apparently they were safe. I'm not gonna just grow mushroom off of oils and eat them and feel good about it. I'll probably test them, but maybe it's fine. Worst case scenario in an apocalypse, I would do it, no issue. But we're not there yet, so hold off on eating your oil mushrooms. But they might be good. It might be a cool way to get some different like mutations. I don't know if that would work, but it might. But apparently, yes, you can grow mushrooms off of contaminated soils, oils, things like that. And sometimes some of them are safe. But really, what's cool about mushrooms and fungi are that no matter what you're growing, you kind of have as many options as you want. It's just about your imagination and what you can come up with. And so especially that's with the base materials. So sometimes, depending on what you're growing, you're going to need supplementation. Sometimes that can just be using a little bit of extra grain spawn. Grain spawn's pretty heavy in nutrients, but as they colonize, they're going to be working and starting to break that down. But the grain spawn is pretty heavy in nutrients, so you can spawn heavy if you're trying to grow on something cool like jeans or a book, or some straw sometimes, or sometimes just cocoa core, just hardwood. You can utilize a little extra grain, and that can kind of be your booster to be able to grow off of different things. But a bunch of them, some are waste, but there's some of them are just way higher in their carbon to nitrogen ratio. So that's something you can look at. Sometimes it's going to depending on which source you get at, but you can kind of Google those carbon nitrogen ratios, estimates of things, and depending on where they're grown, the source, this, that, another, it's going to vary. But you start to play this game of carbon and nitrogen, and when you're supplementing for things. If you want these bigger yields, if you're growing oysters on straw and you're satisfied and it's doing well, but you want maybe something, give them a little bit of fatter yield, bigger clusters, thicker mushrooms or something, you're going to want to start to introduce some more nitrogen, which is just protein. So different foods and things that we look at the protein, those are going to be high in nitrogen. So just kind of be able to think of those. That's the same thing. The nitrogen is amino acids, which is proteins. So each supplements differently. Things like alfalfa or coffee, and I think spent grains are pretty warm as well. Like brewer grains, spent brewery grains are pretty warm or nitrogen heavy. So depending on what you use, it's not always going to be a 1-for-1. You can't use the same amount of soy hull pellets as spent grains, as bran, as this, as that. You got to vary back and forth. So one of the common ones for Master's Mix is going to be soy hull pellets. So those ones are good. You can do those about 50-50. I think a recipe for those is usually 2.5 cups of hardwood fuel pellets, 2.5 cups of soy hull pellets, preferably organic, but are there really any organic? Same with organic wood pellets. Is there really organic trees? Some small ones, but oak? Yes, but with the way Monsanto's out there, not anymore. But that's a rant for another day. But yeah, soy hull pellets are probably one of the major ones. That's Master's Mix, even parts wood pellets to soy hull pellets, and then I think it's 2.5 cups, 2.5 cups, and then 6 cups of water, roughly, or 1.4 liters. My favorite substrate, I've got a slide on it later, but I usually use wheat bran. Wheat bran's a great one. You can use oat bran. You can use other brands. I usually use, it's 5 cups of hardwood fuel pellets, 1.25 cups of wheat bran, and then that's 6 cups or like 1.4 liters of water. Put that all in a bag. I don't worry too much about mixing it. Just kind of dump it in, let it soak up. I'm going to be mixing it once I inoculate it with grain, so not too worried about it. But if you're going to have it sitting for a while, especially if you're just going to pasteurize, or if you don't want to have to mix super heavy, maybe you're just going to try and hit it with like a little inoculation on top, whatever. Then maybe you mix it in real good and even before you pasteurize or sterilize it. But yeah, so then as we continue to add more things like Master's Mix, and we are 50% soy hulls, or we're using wheat bran, and that recipe is about I think like 20% or 25% wheat bran. And so whenever you start to add more nitrogen, add more supplementation, that's kind of just welcoming other contaminants. It's welcoming your fungus that it's going to love it once it hits it, but that's only if bacteria and yeast and other molds don't get to it beforehand. So as we continue to make it more nutritious, we need to be continuously more sterile. So that's where the perk of using some things like cardboard or straw and things like that, it's not super nutritious, so it kind of helps self-select for the fungus. But as we get into some of these more supplemented substrates and more nutritious substrates, we're going to have to start fighting off some contaminants a little bit more, and that's going to require sterilization. Also, if you're in a really warm area, you don't want to add too much grains, too much supplementation, because then that's going to speed up the metabolism and the blocks. I've had I've had blocks sitting indoors, 75-degree room, and it was a reishi block, TFO5 reishi block. So it was sealed in as like a bubble. I should have gotten a video of it. But I brought it outside, and I just wanted to let the block kind of deteriorate outside and see kind of how it slowly breaks down. Because that's what I like to do with my blocks, is just put them outside and see what happens, or in the garden. Some people do cool art and stuff with it, and I should. But usually I'm just like, but what if I fed this to the beast of Mother Nature? So that's usually what I do. But so I was opening a block, and it was a TFO5, a few months old. So it had been chugging for 3 months, probably, full antlers in the bag. And then I ripped the bag open, and the substrate, I didn't even go into it because I was keeping it alive, just letting it sit. And as soon as I ripped open into it, the air itself, I think I got out the temperature gauge before I opened it. And I think the air on the top of the bag, I think, was sitting inside 75-degree room. I think was more like 84 or 85. And then the substrate, I think, was more like 90 degrees, and it was sitting like a 75. It seemed healthy. It was looking good. I posted pictures. If you go on my Instagram, the last TFO5 or rishis that I've posted, the TFO5 is in that. So I think it was cooking. And I think it's just because I used a heavy spawn ratio, and it was I think the wheat bran substrate. Sometimes I use some soy hulls. There's not many soy hulls. They're hard to find in Florida. So I might go back to wheat bran. I might just start doing less supplementation and running mostly wood. Lion's mane likes some supplementation, but I'm kind of also thinking, if I'm going to be trying to do some breeding projects and things, and I'm trying to find things that grow easily in the heat and low humidity, so then if I give someone a grow block or a culture and try and teach them to grow, they don't have like a finicky little thing that doesn't want to grow. There's like a Z, and then if you grow cannabis, that plant doesn't want to exist. Actives, apes, I mean, it wants to exist, but that thing, you have to keep them alive. Certain plants and certain organisms, especially after so much cultivation and selection, things only know how to survive under the hand of growers. So I'm trying to combine mostly wild genetics, so then I'm able to put those in wild conditions and they do better. But I'm also thinking then if I start reducing my supplementation quite a bit, lately I've really just been going probably 30 to 40%, like a 60-40, probably more like a 60-40 soy hulls, or even a little bit less. But But I think if I reduce the supplementation for some breeding projects, maybe I can find some lion's mane, some oysters that don't need much food either and still are able to produce well. So depending on what you grow and work with, the supplementation levels can vary. But I'm thinking maybe I'll select for some not hungry plants, or some not hungry cultures. Sorry, I'll do that numerous times. I'm also trying to, and I've loved growing and gardening and plants. I worked in cannabis for a handful of years in Maine in the medical cannabis, and grew a bunch of plants, made a lot of hash, grown a lot of peppers. I was working in potato fields for a while, so I love plants. Grew up growing sunflowers. I grew a massive cabbage. I just like growing stuff, so that's why I'm here. So I'll keep saying plants and fungus and fruit or flower, and you'll know what I mean. But so supplementation, depending on what you're growing, depending on what you're getting into, depending on what your goals are, maybe you just want a little bit of food, or maybe you're trying to go to the farmer's market and sell a bunch of pounds, and then maybe you want to have a higher supplementation so you have more pounds to sell. If you're just growing for yourself, for your family, for funsies, whatever it is, you're not going to have to supplement that. If you're growing to break down oils and things, you don't have to worry about supplementation. Maybe they'd like the extra food, but just depending on what your situation is, depending on what your location is, look around, decide what supplementation works for you, if you need any, and get creative. Like coffee waste, saving. If you make, I use like a mocha pot. If you use one of the French press or pot coffee, whatever, you can save the coffee grounds. You can freeze them until you're ready, even. So help freeze them kind of helps keep some different competitor fungi and molds and such and bacterias. They're just wet, so bacterias are going to love it. But molds eat up coffee, which is a good sign. It means it's good for them to grow on. And after you brew it, they're pretty neutral and everything, so it's not going to fluctuate the pH too much or get too funky. You don't want to use too much, but again, coffee is a really, really, really good supplement. Use it off your own coffee. Go to Starbucks, local coffee shop, whatever. Use coffee waste. Grow your own coffee. You can probably just have a coffee grow. It doesn't. All the caffeine is broken down. By the time the mushroom grows off of it and it's brewed and all this stuff, there's no caffeine. So you can feed it to animals and stuff, that substrate, that spent mushroom substrate after you use coffee. It should, especially after a couple flushes. I'm pretty sure it's all broken down. Maybe double check that before you actually do it and caffeinate your pigs. But yeah, it breaks down all the caffeine and so decaffeinates it and the waste and stuff at least. So then you can use it and it's safe for animals. Pretty cool. Another random fungus thing, just doing cool ass shit. So supplementation, starting to juice it, especially like here in America, we use a lot of supplements because we want to go get bigger, faster, stronger, all the things, whether it's people, whether it's flowers, pumpkins, fucking giant pumpkins, mushrooms. We want bigger yields faster, always bigger, always more. We don't care how we get there. We'll feed it anything. We got to feed it. Versus more things in some other countries are a little bit more slow and go and work with the organism a little bit and don't push the yields quite as hard. But we're building muscle hamsters out here. All right. We're going to feed them. So then if we're going to feed them, we're going to build our muscle hamster mushrooms. We need to sterilize. The difference is usually, the difference in sterilization versus pasteurization is going to kill mostly some of those bad organisms. And there's no way to know. It's depending on what your substrate source is, how clean it is, things like that. Pasteurization may not be enough. It's not going to kill everything. It's going to leave some organisms alive, but it's going to help kind of reduce all of those and just make it so that, especially within like about 2 weeks or so, your fungus can get a good head start and grow really easily and quickly on those. If you're going to have a little bit more supplementation and you're only going to pasteurize, then you want to go with a heavier spawn ratio. And what this will do is that even though you have a heavier supplementation, with a heavier spawn ratio and just the pasteurization, you're still able to kind of get a better head start, a better kick start, and get rolling a little bit better. So then your fungus kind of has an upper leg compared to some of the contaminants that may in. I find that at about 20%, I need to sterilize. I can get away some species, and especially if I use it quickly, but you can do about 20% with pasteurization, especially with a little extra spawn and good healthy cultures, but maybe not every single culture. Some of those real small or really sluggish cultures may have some difficulties, but oysters are going to blow up a substrate. So, uh, depending on how much food you give it, maybe you go with a sterilization. So then you're going to be wiping out, basically, you're going to be wiping out all of the microbes, microorganisms. So you're creating like a shelf stable, should be good until it's open product. So sterilization is very helpful if you're using old coffee grounds or brewers, some like old wet brewers grains or something. Compost and different manures and such. Maybe you're gonna, depending on the source, depending on how long they've been around, where it came from, maybe you're gonna want to go for a sterilization. But again, some manures actually do better with some of a pasteurization to kind of help select for those microbes and such. Depends on the species, depends on where you are, techniques, play back and forth. But pasteurization, that's going to be about 160 degrees for 2 hours. That can be a steam pasteurization. That can be boiling the straw or already having a hydrated substrate and generating steam in a closed vessel, a room, a tub for about 2 hours. 160 degrees is what you want that substrate to reach. So start the timer once you have a temperature gauge that reaches 160 inside that substrate. Sterilization is going to be looking more like reaching 15 psi and then starting a 3-hour timer or 2.5-hour timer, depending on the substrate. Different medias, heat, and mix and do things differently. But for mushrooms, that's kind of what we found for about 5 or 10 pound blocks. That's how long it takes to be able to penetrate into those blocks, and he'll get those temperatures up at that range and hold off any other microbes. So pasteurization, some things are going to survive, some microbes are going to survive. Play into that, work with that as you will. Sterilization, they're all nuked, they're all gone, they're all nuked. You got a shelf stable product. So if you get something that's sterilized from a vendor or something and something's growing on it or it smells weird, it's no longer sterile. And you should maybe return it, or if you can, or next time we gotta grow your own. Hit me up. We'll get you doing it on your own if you can, if you got the space and time. I get it. It can be a lot, but once you start doing your own, then you have full control of the grain spawn, of the substrate, of your sterilization. So you know what goes wrong if anything does go wrong, and you can blame yourself and then get better next time. But we've talked a little bit, we've rambled a little bit, gone over some different substrate things, whether it's using coffee grounds, cardboard, Bibles, jeans, wood, carbon, nitrogen, water holding, things like that. And what I also think is important to mention, as somebody that loves to garden and pushing spent mushroom substrate, is the impacts of the spent mushroom substrate. So depending on maybe your end goals, maybe you're feeding stuff to worms at the end, maybe you're starting different types of compost, maybe you're feeding some different things to your different animals on the farm, whatever it is, depending on which substrate choice you look into, you use, or maybe where you draw your inspiration and find out where you can create a new substrate or something, is going to be looking into your possible spent mushroom uses and kind of the next stages of the block. And that's also if you're going to be trying to grow on something contaminated and weird, contaminated blocks and soils and substrates, you're going to want to have a plan of something to do with those. Maybe you don't want to add them. They should be pretty clean and reduced and at least better than they were before.
But depending on the concepts, depending on the culture, depending on how well it does, depending on the contaminant, all sorts of things, there'll be some impacts on the spent mushroom substrate. So plan accordingly, use it to inspire yourself, and think about how you're going to use your spent mushroom substrate and what the best source material would be. So they're all going to break down differently, but really it's cool because you're utilizing waste to get food, to get medicine, to enjoy mushrooms. And then those wastes are then more valuable and improved availability of nutrition to the soils, to your compost, because the mushroom has been able to go in there and further break down and further simplify. And it took some nutrients for sure, but further break down and simplify a lot of what's in that substrate. So then other things can come in and make use of it, whether that's wood, breaking down the lignin so other things can get in there and enjoy those benefits, or genes. So depending on what you're growing on, depending on how you want to use your spent mushroom substrate, think accordingly, intertwine, inspire yourself. Don't ruin your roses with some radioactive spent mushroom substrate. So, so some major things to consider. Whether you're picking wood and traditional substrates or using waste or whatever it is, you want to look at a few different things. And one of the most important things, just like with picking your grain and other growing supplies, is going to be your location. So depending on where you are, we have different waste, we have different industries, there's different prices on different woods, there's different woods available. Whatever it is, look around, see what you're near. If you have maybe you got an Amazon warehouse right next door and mountains of cardboard boxes, so you should use it, whatever it is. Look around your location, see what you can use, what's available, and then also look at your species and what species you're trying to grow. Oysters are probably the widest ranging consuming mushrooms. Like, they can break down damn near anything. They have super strong little enzyme factories, basically, so then they can just produce a whole bunch of enzymes to get into and break down incredible different substrates and complex molecules, and really simple molecules, just really, really well, and really fast. So oysters are a great species if you're trying to get into some different weird substrates, but if you're going to be growing things, different species, you're going to want to look at what they want and tailor your substrates to that. Cost is a major one. Just because it's more expensive doesn't mean it's better, right? So if you can grow things on cheaper substrates that are more readily available, that's going to leave you more room for profit. Maybe your mushrooms also like it better. Just because people say to grow on wood with soybean holes doesn't mean you have to grow on wood with soybean holes. Soybean holes are really expensive in Florida. Find and pick around, choose what works for you. But also look into labor. If I have to go out there and harvest hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bananas and then dry all the banana fronds myself, and then also collect all the coffee and maybe harvest the coffee, whatever it is, I have to do all of that, shred it all up, do this, do that. At a small scale, that's fine. But if you're going to try and be at a large scale, that's where a bunch of labor costs definitely come into play. And you don't want to do something that's too ridiculously labor intensive if you're trying to draw a profit and you don't have the resources for it. So if you have to force it, it's probably shit. But think about it. Labor costs is the biggest thing. Labor issues, even, you don't want to overwork yourself just for the, you do, but you don't want to do it just for the, I grew mushrooms on blank. It's not worth it, but it's worth it to experiment. But larger scales, labor is definitely something you want to consider. And with those larger scales, you also want to look at consistency. So different substrates, different supplementation profiles, different variations are going to have different consistencies. The same with the species, that's going to vary and change the consistency. But depending on what you need, how much production you're looking for, you might need to vary your expectations and your plans on the substrate. And then also the structure. So I haven't really touched on this too much, but really you want to balance the structure a little bit and not have 20-pound sack of wet sawdust, because then at the base you're going to get pretty anaerobic, right? And so maybe if you have a massive sack of just sawdust, you add in a little bit of straw or something, so then, or vermiculite, or other different things, wood chips, so that way you're able to get some of these larger pieces with maybe a couple slightly smaller pieces, especially at some larger scale substrates. But you can interplay with some of these different physical structures to help kind of better aerate and create some stronger mycelium within the substrate itself. I said it earlier, but here it is, nicey nice on a. I could have just done this the whole time. I didn't. I guess I did a couple hand motions. But this is the nice, take a screenshot. We got 5 Cubs hardwood fuel pellets, barbecue pellets. I prefer oak, but any wood, really, any hardwood will do. 1.4 liters or about 6 cups. They're pretty close to the same amount. And depending on the wood and the scoops and things, it varies. But I don't do the weights for this recipe just because I never have a scale around, and honestly, it's close enough. And I think it's just easier for some people, instead of busting out a scale, to do this and tell them to put in this many grams of this many. You can grab a cup. We're in America. We use weird measurements. Scoop a couple things in there. Dump in some water. Combine it a little bit. You can mix up a little bit. Let it saturate, soak up. Squish the bag together. Take all the air out of it. Press it into a little block. You want to put that in the pressure cooker about once it hits 15 psi, air out the pressure cooker, let it boil, make sure there's plenty of water in there, close it off, let the pressure cooker boil, steam, put the cap on, let the pressure get to 15 psi. Once it hits 15 psi, you can start your 2.5 hour timer. I'll go for 2.5 hours. Sometimes I just go for 30 minutes just to be sure everything has hit those temps and gotten where it needs to be. In terms of waiting 2.5 hours, versus 3 hours, really the whole process of heating up and everything, I'm in almost 5 hours. That 30 minutes doesn't make much of a difference, but it makes, in terms of waiting, but it lets me know that those are definitely sterile, that everything's definitely clean, that everything's good to work with. So that extra 30 minutes sometimes sucks, but 2.5 hours versus 3 hours, sometimes that 3 hours worth it, especially if you're going with those heavier supplementations. But that right there, that's Old Faithful. You can buy all of the. You can go buy barbecue pellets sometimes at the grocery store. Wheat brands at the grocery store. I use popcorn as a grain a lot. You can buy that at the grocery store. So it's a nice, simple, easy recipe. But you can also just use wood, and you can just hydrate wood to field capacity and pasteurize that. But that's what we got. That's our ramble on substrates, on supplementations, on some different wastes. Nothing too crazy, but just just putting some different ideas and different thoughts out there, so that more people can continue to be aware of them. I can continue to learn from other people. I can continue to run through the process and learn from some more things. But yeah, that's what we got. If you got any questions, whenever you watch this, you can leave a comment. You can email me, or you can join us in our communities, whether that's through our Discord, our Patreon. Check me out on Instagram, follow me there, reach out there. And for any of these links, ideas, thoughts, questions, more information, I've got swampfoxfungi.com. I've got some different information, some blogs, some links up on there that link you to some other things. But check it out. Think about some substrates. Think about how you're growing, and maybe what else you could grow in the area. Get creative. You don't say you can't grow mushrooms because you don't have access to this or that or a certain supply, because they'll grow off of anything. You've probably got a dirty pair of jeans that you don't wear anymore. So get some grain spawn, pasteurize those jeans, pasteurize the book, the Bible, something. Start growing some mushrooms. So share some thoughts, share what you've done, share your substrate ideas, your recipes, if you made it this far. Truly, I love you. I appreciate you. Let me know, and I'll send you a virtual high five or something at the least. But thank you for watching, tuning in. I hope I at least inspired some sort of fungal thought, progress, maybe answered a question you had, maybe you heard something that you didn't know. Going to continue to do these, run through these. I know I talk fast and ramble, and I want to give more information, but I got to just organize it a little bit more in my brain. So that's why I'm going to be continuing to do these. So I hope you continue to join me for these live videos, ask questions, reach out, join our communities. I just really want to get more people growing mushrooms, interacting with fungus, and living better, more holistic lives. So next week we're going to be talking about oysters. I already made the thing. So set your notifications, go to my YouTube, look for next week. I already got it set up. We're talking about oyster mushrooms. We're going to do a little bit. I talked about them a lot today in terms of all the substrates and all their potentials, breaking down, eating a bunch of different things, how they're pretty resilient and flexible. So next week, we'll do a little bit on the history of oysters. We'll talk about their uses, their diversity. I mean, if you look at it, there's snow oysters, aspen oysters, the amount of blue oysters out there. I mean, the Florida oyster is an Ostreatus. All blue oysters are within the Ostreatus species. And so there's blue oysters, Florida oysters. I think snow oysters are also Ostreatus. And then if you look at all the different types of oysters and breedings of oysters and the super scallop oysters and friggin' lynx paw oysters, there's an oyster, whatever thing there is, substrate there is, question, wherever you are, there's an oyster for it. There's oysters everywhere. So next week, we're going to be talking about oysters. If you have any oyster questions, let me know. Oyster thoughts, oysters, anything about oysters, let me know. We're going to cover it next week. I'll keep babbling. Thank you again. It's the Swamp Fox in the swamp. We'll be back next week. Thank you. I'm just going to start blowing kisses at the end of all my